Hey, I'm Kylie with The Gray Outdoors, and we're going to be introducing a new series simply called Go Long Range. In this series, we're going to be covering things from setting up a rifle scope to truing up ballistic data to how to even set up a kestrel or how to set up your ballistics app, where to get that information from, and lots of other things. This is going to be a multiple part series, and in this first episode, we're simply just going to be covering setting up a rifle scope and different reticles and all that fun stuff. As far as who am I in my background, I'm really no one special. I have no military and law enforcement background. I'm simply a guy that likes to shoot a lot, and I do shoot quite a bit, usually shooting a few thousand rounds a year at steel, 500 yards or further typically. And so I definitely have some experience in that side. I have also competed in the PRS series here in Missouri, so the Precision Rifle series, and have done competitions, typically placing in the top 10 or so in the last few of them that I've gone to, and that's with 40 to 60 shooters. So like I said, I'm definitely no expert about everything. I possibly will say things that may not be 100% true, but I do have a lot of the confidence in the things that I've said, and usually it's things that I have tested, things that I've trued, things that I have validated, and things that I've learned from those top competition shooters that I shoot with. So, starting this episode of this part one is simply going to be setting up a rifle scope and different parts of a rifle scope and different reticles and how to read it. Now, diving first into different rifle scopes. So in front of me, I have three different scopes. I have a Night Force ATACR 5-25. I have a Vortex Strike Eagle 5-25. And I have a Hawk Optics Frontier 34. They're high-end 3-18 that they came out with a couple years ago. I have other rifle scopes that I use, but these are kind of my three main ones that I like. And breaking down basically the different parts of a rifle scope, I see a lot of misinformation or a lot of people not completely understand the different parts of a rifle scope, so I kind of want to break that down first. So, at the very front of the rifle scope, you're going to have what's called your objective. So it's talking about how big is this diameter, and that's usually where you see the last number of your rifle scope. So 5-25 is talking about the power range, so how much magnification do you have, but then you have that last number, so 5-25 by 56, and that's simply telling me the objective size or the diameter of this rifle scope. So moving on down from the objective, we have the tube diameter, and the purpose of this is really, for one, it's how we mount the scope to the gun, but not only that, it gives us and limits us on how much room we can move this reticle up and down. That's a big deal. In front of me are of all three of these scopes. They are all 34 millimeter tubes, so their tube diameter is 34 millimeters. Gives us the most amount of elevation ability, basically, to dial that scope further and try to shoot longer range. So ideally you want a bigger tube diameter, so like a 30 or a 34 mil or a 35 millimeter tube is ideal, because it's going to simply give you more room for adjustment. So the more room for adjustment, theoretically, the farther that rifle scope has the potential to go. So, moving on down from the tube diameter, we have the turrets. The turrets are simply going to be how we adjust the reticle, how we move this reticle up, down, left, and right. So our top one is going to be for elevation or up and down. So as I dial my top turret counterclockwise, so I'm turning this direction, I am increasing my impacts. My windage knob here on the side is how I change left and right. So I can dial back or dial forward to go left and right. The turn on the other side of this that you see on most modern long-range rifle scopes is simply going to be your parallax adjustment. And what that simply means is, oftentimes from the shooter perspective, we typically see a change in focus. As you move the parallax knob forward and back, you notice the target changes or moves in and out of focus. But really more important than that, what you're adjusting and what you're actually doing is making sure that as you, the shooter, are back here and you're looking through the reticle, you're not having problems of looking at it from a weird angle and changing your point of impact, or point of aim, point of impact. So for example, if I have my finger in front of me and I change my perspective from the other side of my finger, it changes where that finger is pointing. That is parallax adjusting, so that we get it to a point that even if I look off to a little bit of an angle, my point of aim through my rifle scope or my reticle is still the same. But we typically see this or perceive this as a shooter as a focus adjustment, although it is doing that also. Moving further back on the rifle scope, we're gonna have, of course, our magnification ring, where you can change the magnification on the rifle scope. On all these scopes, you kind of see a throw lever on top of the scope. So the ATACR has kind of a little nubbin, and the Vortex has a clamp style throw lever. That's pretty nice. I really like it. And the Hawk, kind of like the Night Force, just has a little nubbin end that you can just quickly dial that magnification up and down. It's just super nice. Instead of having to go up and just turn your hand like this, you can just simply use a thumb and just roll that magnification over and back. The very back part of the rifle scope is simply referred to as a diopter. The purpose of the diopter is to simply focus your eye to the reticle, and then the parallax adjustment focuses the target to the reticle and your eye at the same time. That's a big confusion I see on a lot of shooters out there, or a lot of hunters, is that they don't set the diopter, or they set it improperly, or they turn this until the target is in focus. And in reality, you should set this one time and then never touch it again, because it's set with your eye. How you set the diopter is pretty simple. Typically, I like to be at maximum magnification. I like to be at something really close, staring at something pretty bright, because of course, as you turn up magnification, the light gets cut. As far as how easily light transmits through the rifle scope. I'm also going to set my parallax adjustment to its max setting, so that what I'm looking at is out of focus, and I'm simply going to be looking through the rifle scope and adjusting the diopter until the reticle on the inside is crystal clear. So that's pretty simple to set. And like I said, once you set the diopter, you shouldn't have to touch it again, really, unless a different shooter or something drastically changes. The next thing that I want to get into is simply talking about more in detail things about the reticle and adjusting a rifle scope. Oftentimes, it's a really common question for especially newer shooters getting into it, of what type of scope should they buy, MOA or mil-radian or mils. Simply what they're referring to is the adjustment on the turns. So we already know that the turns move the reticle up and down to change impact, and mils or MOA is the unit of measure that that rifle scope would use. And there are two main ones, and that is, like I just said, MOA or mils. But it's important to understand what these units of measure are. And what I mean by that is that a MOA or mils, it is not a linear measurement. It is not measuring something between point A and point B. That is not what these measurements are. A mil or MOA is an angular adjustment. So if this is a line, we're dealing with angular measurements. It was a really crude drawing. That is simply what MOA or mils are. It's an angular measurement. So it starts off small and it grows further and further apart. That is what these rifle scopes measure in. A rifle scope does not measure in inches and does not measure in centimeters. That is not how these rifle scopes work. It is an angular measurement that gradually increases over time. One MOA at 100 yards is equal 1 inch. But, however, 1 MOA at 1,000 yards is equal to 10 inches. Not exactly, it's actually a little different than that. It's not exactly 1 inch at 100 yards. It's a little over that. But just for simplicity, we're just gonna call it 1 inch. But here we see that it is an angular measurement. So that's MOA, and that's pretty simple. Mils, or sometimes called mil radians possibly. So 1 mil at 100 yards is equal to 3.6 inches. And then we take that same thing of 1 mil at 1,000 yards is equal to 36 inches. So we can see, yet again, just like MOA, it is a angular measurement. So they're no different as far as what they do, it's simply how they measure it. And really when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter which one you buy. It doesn't really matter which one you go towards, whether mil or MOA. At least in my opinion, it doesn't matter. Now, what does matter, however, is, if you're with your group of buddies, maybe you should all be running the same thing. This way you all can talk in the same language or the same angular measurement when talking about adjusting. So now I want to go ahead and dive into a reticle and kind of talk about how, what the different things mean on this reticle and how we interpret the things in this reticle to what we need to do on the scope side with the turrets, which is really the most important thing. So here in front of us, I have a EBR-7C. It's a vortex reticle. That's exactly what this Strike Eagle has right here. It's kind of their most common reticle that they've used for a while now. This is a pretty simple reticle here, and I'm really kind of a big fan of it. So this is a MOA based reticle. Really doesn't matter. It's going to look identical. Just the numbers on here are for MOA, not mils, just for the sake of today's video. So in front of us, I have our normal reticle. So if we zoom in here, so these numbers here that you're reading, these are MOA. So we have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28 MOA on the horizontal stadia. So when we're talking about the horizontal stadia, we're talking about this line right here. Think of the horizon, and the horizon's flat. This is the horizontal stadia line. We also have a vertical stadia line that you're going to see the same exact numbers. So we have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, so on and so forth. This is the vertical stadia going up and down. So on this reticle, you're going to have more information too. So for example, these little lines or these little notches here, that's 1 MOA. Big notch is 2, that's 3, and here's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. So these hashes in between are all 1 MOA tick marks. As you move down the reticle, we start to see this Christmas tree kind of effect. These dots are simply here to let us know the same information that our horizontal stadia is. Basically allows our horizontal stadia to be kind of moving down with our reticle. So if we want to hold over on a target and hold windage, we can do both of those things without even having to touch the turrets of our rifle scope. So just like on the horizontal stadia, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth, relatively simple. But these wind dots are following the same thing. So we have, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so this number doesn't tell you how far you are over here horizontally. It tells you how far you are vertically. The biggest thing to understand is that this reticle is your ruler, And this is your adjustment. So think of it like, yet again, building a house. The reticle is your ruler. This is your chop saw of where you make that adjustment on the board, the 2x4 or whatever you're cutting. So one measures, one actually does the work. You can just hold off the reticle if you want, or you can simply dial that into your scope, whichever one you want to do. So let's say that you had an impact. Let's say you shot and you landed here on the target, or that's where you saw your impact was. You aimed for the center of the reticle, let's say, and this is where you hit. Well, in this case, we could count. We got 1, 2, so we need to go up 2 MOA, and we're kind of right here in between. So in between 1 and 2, it's about 1.5 MOA. So we need to go to the right 1.5 MOA. The nice thing with this is that we can also use this for long range shooting or just simply zeroing in your rifle scope. We could almost take a 1 or 2 shot zero if you can see your impact on the paper. Because yet again, on my piece of paper, if I'm zeroing at 100 yards and I hit up here, I can simply use my reticle as a measuring tool to bring that point of aim, point of impact to the very center. That's one of the nice things I also like about using these scopes, because I can usually zero scope really quickly. The next thing that I want to talk about is first focal plane or second focal plane. And when hearing this about rifle scopes, it's referring to the scaling on the reticle. Is it always true, or is the reticle always the same? Because as you change magnification, right, if I'm at 10 magnification and I go up to 20 or 25, well, the scaling inside the reticle, if the reticle still looks the same, the scaling is no longer correct, and that would be a second focal plane style reticle. A second focal plane simply means the reticle does not grow or shrink with magnification. It is always the same size. And the problem with that is typically that if you try to shoot at 12 power, let's say, and you think the numbers on your reticle are true, well, in reality, they're not. Because on a second focal plane scope, the reticle numbers are only true at 1 magnification. Let's say in this case, it's oftentimes max power. So this is a 25 power scope. So it would theoretically be correct or trued at 25 power. If I'm at 10 power or I'm at 15 power, those numbers aren't accurate or true anymore. That's one key thing to understand. If you are at 10 power and you measure that it's 4 MOA low, well, it's not really 4 MOA low because you're not on the true reticle. Your ruler isn't correct anymore because you're not on the correct magnification. Whereas a first focal plane scope would be growing and shrinking with magnification. So as you zoom in your rifle scope, the reticle gets bigger, and as you zoom out on the rifle scope, the reticle gets smaller. The advantage to that is that the scaling is always true and is always correct. There are, however, pros and cons to either one. So for example, a first focal plane scope is super nice, but in the same breath, when you get to the lower magnification, like 5 power, 6 power, the reticle isn't even really usable because it's so small. Whereas a second focal plane scope could still be very easily be used on lower magnification settings because it's still that nice, big, crisp reticle. So now I want to get into a little bit about setting up a rifle scope for you as the shooter. Now the first thing to be set up for you is the eye relief. Now, of course, you need to make sure the rifle has the proper length of pull for you and the style of shooting that you're doing. I'm a shorter guy, and even then I prefer a shorter length of pull than really what I would need because of mainly how I shoot and the positions that I'm preparing for. I would rather have too short of a length of pull than too long. And then setting up the eye relief, I want to be able to just get into that rifle scope and just immediately see perfectly throughout the reticle. when you do this, you want to be adjusting your eye relief at the max magnification, because that's when the eye relief is the most sensitive, or is the least forgiving, I guess you could say. So I typically like to verify, and you can get a base setting going to your base magnification, but really you need to fine tune everything at max magnification, because that's when the eye relief is the most sensitive, or is the least forgiving, or is the narrowest spot. And so that's usually what I'm going to recommend. Just if you can get into your position and just immediately see everything just fine. I'm not having to move closer in or further out. I'm just going straight from my natural position, get into, and everything is already there. Just kind of what you want. The next thing, once you get eye relief, is setting up the diopter, which we've talked about some so far. So I typically also set this at max magnification at the infinity, or the max amount my parallax can go, looking into something bright. Of course, you know, for the YouTube people, it's clear. But I want to make sure that when I get into position, the reticle is just immediately crystal clear. Yet again, the diopter is setting not what I'm looking at in focus, but the reticle to my eye. So when I get into position, is it just immediately crisp, or does my eye have to adjust a little bit to make that reticle crystal clear? Ideally, my eye shouldn't have to work or strain to make this reticle be in focus. If you're having to really strain your eyes, it's gonna give you a headache over time. So setting up this diopter is really, really crucial. It's gonna be a lot easier for, especially for an all-day shooting kind of situation. Eye relief, setting the diopter, and then the height. Now, most of the guns that I like to shoot are gonna have an adjustable comb or cheek piece, and I really like that. Being able to adjust this perfectly where it needs to be, so I can set my rifle scope where it needs to be in the height and the clearance that I need on my barrel, and then I can adjust this and make this the height that it needs to be. And yet again, just like everything else, you want to just find that natural position and be able to get right into that position and not have to fight it. That's the biggest thing. If you're having to go and, you know, bob it to try and find the reticle, or you're having to kind of fish or find it on the height, that's not good. Like I said, the goal of setting up a rifle scope is to be able to just simply get into it and just be crystal clear. I'm not fighting it, I'm not struggling. It is immediately where it needs to be at. And that's just gonna take time, repetition, dry fire, and kind of just getting used to getting behind your gun. And it's pretty simple. As far as what do I look for in a rifle scope, what are characteristics that I look for me personally? For me, I prefer something that's going to be in the 5 to 25 power range for long range shooting. If you're hunting, and let's say that you're only going to be hunting out to 500 yards, sometimes a good old 3 to 18, that's kind of what I have this Hawk for, is it's a really good 3 to 18 that I can use for those hunting situations. And not have to be super zoomed in, have something a little bit lighter weight. I also do like first focal plane scopes because I like the fact that my reticle is always true. I do accept the faults of it. The fact that being at that lower power range, I am gonna suffer. I'm not gonna be as easy to see, especially in a low light situation, or a dusk situation is gonna be a little bit tougher. But I like the knowing that no matter where I'm at, it's gonna be true. I will say, however, if I was shooting a 3 to 18 or like a 2 to 10 or a 2 to 12 power scope, I wouldn't be as worried about having a second focal plane, because I know in that situation, if I'm gonna take a shot, I'm probably gonna be at max magnification anyway. And at that point, I know my reticle is gonna be true. So with the hunting scope, I don't mind going second focal plane if it's within the range that, you know, a 2 to 12 or 2 to 10 or like a 3 to 18 probably would be perfectly fine. I'm used to first focal plane. That's what I shoot all the time at competitions, and just long range shooting. So kind of just what I'm used to and kind of what I'm spoiled with. Other things that I'm looking for is at least a 30mm tube. All my scopes are 34mm tubes, but if you're wanting to shoot further than 500 yards, let's say, it's really gonna be advantageous that you at least get a 30mm tube so that you have enough adjustment in the tube diameter to make those impacts. At least would be my recommendation. I also like exposed turrets, more recreational shooting or competition shooting. I don't mind if my turrets aren't locking. So like this scope here, I can just turn the turret. It doesn't lock at all. The Night Force is the same way. You just turn the turret, it doesn't lock. The Strike Eagle, however, and the Hawk, they have a locking turrets. So I have to pull up on the turret before I make an adjustment, which is kind of nice. So for a hunting scope, I prefer a locking turret, or so a competition or recreational shooting, I don't really mind having a non-locking turret. Another nice thing to have is a zero stop, or at least a rev indicator. So like on this Night Force, I can turn this turret and it tells me how many revs I've gone, and I can easily go back to where I was. So like some people may freak out if I come over here and take my turn and just turn this. To me, it doesn't matter because I can look at it and clearly see, okay, well, I'm on the second rev or the start of the second rev. I can simply just turn this right back down to where I was at on my zero, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm back to where I was. So not a big deal. Or if you have a zero stop, you can simply, go and set your zero stop, and you can't go past your zero stop, which is super nice. One of the last things I did want to talk about when setting up your rifle scope is that when you go shooting for the first time to zero it, and odds are your turret are gonna have these exposed numbers on the turret. And let's say that you zero it and it lines up weird, where a number doesn't quite line up, or you're pointing right at a 4 or a 6 MOA or 6 mils or whatever it is. And how do you get that back to zero? The nice thing with these turrets is that all of these turrets on most modern rifle scopes are also going to have a zeroable turret. So what that simply means is the fact that when I go shooting and I get 0 on my gun, I can make this turret go back to 0, so that when I dial to 4 or when I dial to 5, it's actually 4 or 5 MOA. So when you go zeroing a gun, you also need to zero out your turrets. And I'm going to talk about a little bit how to do that. It's a little different for every manufacturer, but the concept is pretty much the same throughout. So on this Strike Eagle anyway, that Vortex sends this tool that they use to remove the turret. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the elevation turret, basically just a screwdriver end on the very top. I'm going to break it loose, and I'm going to get this turret basically loose enough where it will come off. Now the turret is removed from the scope. Now I can orientate this to wherever I needed to find my 0 and line that up with the line and just push down. And now I just tighten my top screw again, and it'll be all set up. So once you get the rifle scope on your gun and adjusted to the proper eye relief and height and everything that you like, and you go shoot it for the first time, and you get your gun zeroed, when you get back home and do cleaning or whatever else you want to do in your gun, make sure you set those zeros on your turrets, and then you're ready to go long range. Then you're ready to go hit the field once you get your ballistic side all figured out. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of this part 1 series of Go Long Range. I challenge you to go out, shoot your rifle, get familiar with your rifle, dry fire, get practice, get out and just have fun with your buddies. If you have any questions, of course, drop them down below in the comment section, and let's have a conversation. Let's see what we can learn together, I guess you could say. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.